addressing the complex challenges of the future, what we all put in a pot called sustainability issues or caring about society, social responsibility. These all require a strong collaborative approach, and we always talk about and speak about ecosystems. So I want to try today to explain you how ecosystems build, and let me see if this works out. I think smart ecosystems are ecosystems that naturally and efficiently generate solutions or in the right time frame and with a really long-lasting legacy. They can't be designed and they can't be set up from scratch by design, so they grow over time. And so what I try now is going with one example which I think fits perfectly into that. I pick out the book which stands somewhere in the center of my career. With that title, it's difficult to be taken serious. So the book you see here, it's called Wer wird Milliardär? Who Becomes Billionaire? It's quite an old book, let's say. It describes the situation around the years 1995 to 2000, and let me dig into it with a kind of a mind map. So this book is about the work of a team I worked in. We were three. It plays around 95 to the year of 2000 in a small investment bank in Zurich. It's a story around IPOs, a hype, let's call it the dot-com hype. Yeah, and let's see, we'll see how we dig in. Okay, so let's try to build that ecosystem and then in the end answer the question, so what? Looking back is always easy. So we start with the book. The author, that's Roger Schawinski. Then we add the year. The book was written in 2003. Then I add who gave the book to me. It's Thomas Rüegg, that's my uncle father. Then where did I read it? I was on a project in Madrid. At the time I was a strategy consultant. I've been a strategy consultant for 18 years. Then we add the key acts. It all plays in Bank Vontobel, a traditional bank in Zurich. So that's our mind map. From that we build the whole, let's say, ecosystem, make it a little bit nicer. Okay, let's start with our central actors. I had studied material sciences at ETH and after that did a master study in economics and business administration and joined the team, the corporate finance team of Bank Vontobel in the IPO business. So this is mainly described in this book, our mind map. Key people were Jörg Fischer, head of the bank and at the same time also head of the Swiss Stock Exchange. Then very important was Hans-Dieter Vontobel, in short HDV. He was the chairman of the bank, strictly value-oriented, son of his father Hans Vontobel, who was still active in the bank. Then key person, main act in the whole book, Hans-Peter Bachmann, PhD. He was my boss, let's say. I was his assistant. He was head of investment banking and driving the whole IPO business. What I also want to add are the other key figures which are important for me during that time at Vontobel, related to me maybe in some other relations. One is definitely Dave Bloomer. He used to row with me in the double sculls at Grasshopper. We sat in the boat between the age of 17 to 20, day by day, competed together. Dave is important. He also worked for Fontobel a little bit before I joined. Connected to Dave is our fellow colleague, much younger colleague from Grasshopper Rowing, André Bantley. He later followed a little bit the footsteps of Dave. I say a little bit more to him later. He links up to the business and to Fontobel, and maybe he's part of our later called ecosystem. Good, then we have in dotted lines here below Pete Fanconi. He at a later time, much later in the late 2000s, not late 2000s, in 2010-11 was the head of private banking of Fontobel. He's together with me in the board of Grasshopper Club now, and he's also a member of the Guild Safran, where we all in. At the time he was running a consultancy together with a later fellow of Deloitte. Very important during the project, the IPO business, and during my stay at Bank Fontobel is Professor Alfred Mittler. He was the corporate finance professor of the University of Zurich. I wrote all my thesis during studies with him, and also my master's diploma work. I come to that later. So, and the main acts of the whole book are the IPOs, which I was also part of. But let's stick a little bit more to quickly what we have with Dave. To conclude that, Dave was same age, or is the same age as me. He started with Credit Suisse, was then with the age of 13 in the board of Credit Suisse, running the asset management business. Moved over to Swiss Re, was there also in the board as the chief investment officer and for a new business. Joined later then BlackRock as head of EMEA, and was also in the group board of BlackRock. He was a young leader of World Economic Forum, etc., etc. So a peer related to our business here. Another one was, which I can mention here, is then Philipp Hildebrand. He definitely the vice chair of BlackRock, was important to us also during the times at Fontobel. He also used to work with Fontobel. Come a little bit closer to him later. Now let's start with our IPOs. So the whole IPO business at Fontobel started in 94 or continued in 94 after 7 years of no IPOs at the Swiss Stock Exchange. It was the first company to go public, the company ESG in the semiconductor field. They produce machines in the semiconductor business. They were very successful. We had then one project called Micronas, also from semiconductor industry. Then SEZ, also semiconductor industry, and AlphaSem, all with very, very interesting stories, all described in this whole book, all adding to the whole income and profit of Bank Fontobel at the time between 94 and 1919, and also the company Comax, a very interesting story. We brought them, or at there we were co-lead for the IPO, and so we had many others, but these were key influences also of my whole experience following all these IPOs to success. Let's add a little bit the connections from Professor Mittler. My professor is also Professor Volkart. He was the senior professor, fellow for corporate finance at the University of Zurich, a key owner of literature. Also in that team was Aldo Schellenberg, but he moved then out and founded his own consultancy. He was my direct boss in the army. Later he became number 2 of the Swiss Army, very important in the last 20 years of my career. Also involved into the whole story here. Then we have what I mentioned before, my thesis, my works with Professor Mettler. The first was about the IPO of Micronos, where I described in depth our whole transactions, etc. We won the business against Goldman Sachs, which was quite important for us, quite a very, very interesting story, and the baseline for the next few years of IPO business of Bank Vontobel. My master's thesis then, a few years, not many years later, was on the whole book building process in Switzerland for the IPOs. At the time we set the price, and we only introduced book building right after I wrote my thesis. So I wrote this thesis together with Bank Vontobel and with Professor Mettler. After that, all the IPOs were based on the book building pricing. One of the key IPOs at the time, not run by Vontobel, was the Swisscom IPO. Somehow, then also part of my story. Good, quite a busy time. By the way, I don't jump into the details of the book. You can read it. It's a really astonishing description of how the IPO business run. Lately, last year, I connected again to Professor Mettler, who spent the last 20 years in the USA. He came back to Switzerland after Trump moved out. This was not the reason, but Trump was the reason to move out. Anyway, we are connected again. And so a little bit more to Philipp Hildebrand, as I crossed his way later in my work as a strategy consultant. When he was head of the Swiss National Bank in 2008, I brought clients, Saudi clients, to an IOSCO conference. I don't explain it, but Philipp Hildebrand was a key speaker. IOSCO and FINMA, the organizers, and at the time we were building up with Arthur D. Little the whole Saudi FINMA, Saudi Capital Market Authority, CMA, and Philipp Hildebrand was an important peer for us also to bring in certain Swiss knowledge into this Saudi Greenfield project. One of the project members at the project at CMA was Yassir Al-Rumayyan. He also joined me for the IOSCO conference here in Basel, where we introduced him to Philipp Hildebrand. Yassir became now chairman of Saudi Aramco, most valuable company in the world. He is also a member of the board of Uber. He is also chairman of the Saudi Investment Fund, and quite a powerful person in this Middle East environment. He was not really, he was a difficult person during the project, but still our project from 2008 for the Capital Market Authority in Saudi Arabia still has a claim or a footprint as one of the most successful projects of ADL in the Middle East, but also for Saudi Arabia, it's a showcase. Good. Philipp was also an athlete. He took part at the Universiade, so he's related to university sport, where I have a big foot in it. Then Philipp is connected to André Lüthi, head of Globetrotter, which we heard a lot in Switzerland this year. I know him from my sports and TV with Swiss Olympic, etc., etc. Let's describe also André Bantli, an athlete of mine when I was coach for the Grasshopper Elite team and in the Swiss national team. He followed Dave to Credit Suisse, was a long time Credit Suisse asset manager all over the world, then joined the Swiss branch of BlackRock, and now is again back in Vontobel. So André Bantli closes the circle and is now sitting at Vontobel. Bantli Fiori, that was the boat, very successful boat at Junior World Championships, coached by me, and also Swiss champion in the 8, etc., etc. Long story in the world of sports. Then adding to Dave, we have a dimension of sports. He was chairman of Right to Play Switzerland, a social responsible organization who does good via sports.
Let's meet Hans-Peter Bachmann. He's the main actor of this book, so he's in the center of the whole story, which is a little bit of drama, but yeah, in the end, I think Hans-Peter definitely leads a good life. Yeah, his co-worker, or my co-worker, was Sergio Terribellini, definitely the brain of the whole corporate finance team. He was he was designing the transactions in all IPOs. Adding to the team, or part of Fontobel, was the senior private banker Walter Temperli. He played a key role as he got allocated many shares after an IPO or before day one, and got quite powerful through that. He sits now with me in the board of Grasshopper Campus. That's the organization caring about the whole football fields at Grasshopper. To Hans-Peter mainly, what is important to mention here, the rest you have to read in the book. Besides the whole push of the IPO business, where he was really successful, he pushed also with us the private equity holding, and at the time new concept. By the way, must have been the same time as the colleagues from Goldman Sachs, Urs Wittlisbach and Alfred Gantner and fellows founded Partners Group. So they were then leading their way straight forward up from the time. This was around 98, I would say. Also later, 99, Hans-Peter was the driver of a first e-bank. We didn't have e-banks at the time. So U was a tremendous, tremendous is the wrong word, a huge, very complex project where all consultancies like PwC, etc. were involved. It was a peer project to a project called RedSafe. Where I was later then a little bit connected again. Hans-Peter was a driver. I met him later, many years later. I met him later, 2010, in the elevator of Interconti Singapore when he came from the sauna, and I went to town to go together with my wife. Next is Hans-Dieter Fontobel, chairman of the bank, son of Hans Fontobel. Hans Fontobel lived then quite long. He was friend of my grandfather, Albert Rüegg, also linking up to the story. Hans-Dieter was also a friend of my father. My father at the time international economic advisor to the first democratic minister or president of Hungary, Antal Jóska. My father helped Hans-Dieter find ein Gestüt, let's say, how do you say, location for his horses in Hungary. A little bit later, around 98, 1990, we had also dinner there with Hans-Dieter and his wife and my sisters, my parents, in Seepalma in Hungary. So then let's add a few words to Jörg Fischer. He was, besides heading the bank, he was heading the Swiss Stock Exchange, later then the whole organization of SIX. He was also involved in what led then to FINMA. He was running the electronic stock exchange project, etc. But also he, and to add that quickly, he, like Hans-Peter Bachmann and others, moved out of the bank then after the 2000 happenings. So let's move down to where I read the book. That adds a nice dimension. So reading the book was in Madrid during one short night. I had it with me on project with Holcim. I was there with my company Capgemini and the fellow colleagues from Gemini. We were strategy consultants, and we set up the whole European Shared Service Center for Holcim in Madrid. I actually joined the strategy consulting industry right after my time at Fontobel. So I jumped in with Ernst & Young strategy consulting, which at that time around 99, 2000, sold its consulting arm to Capgemini. So for a certain time we were called Capgemini Consulting. Together with Gemini strategists, we built a strategy team, and so I led various strategy projects all over the world between 1990 and 2004, mainly focusing on the financial services industry. Adding to Holcim, I have many friends at Holcim, but also my father worked had a project with Holcim. He helped them buy some companies in Hungary, and the people are the same involved in the Simplify project.
Okay, then I have family in Madrid. This would add an additional angle to the whole story. Many of my cousins also working as CEOs of banks, etc. This would make it more interesting, but we skip that. Also, I shorten up the next angle of family. Thomas Rüegg, the brother of my mother, he gave me the book. He was CEO and owner of Rüegg Nageli. That's an old traditional company founded in the 19th century, also with my grandfather in a big driver role. Thomas Rüegg, my uncle, was governor of Rotary Switzerland, like my grandfather, like his father. So they were used to build ecosystems, and especially in the role of doing good for society, they were the first ones to promote that whole way of thinking and living. So then let's move to the author himself. He brings in quite a surprising angle. First, that he writes a book about that. I was really surprised how many details he knew about the whole process around all the happenings. He studied with Hans-Peter Bachmann, so he was a friend of him. They must have had an in-depth exchange around that. Roger is famous to every Swiss, so I don't need to explain him. Interesting is that he brings an angle into other people in an ecosystem, in a network that connects sport, government or regulators like heads of Federal Office of Communication, and etc. I don't go in depth here into the names which you can see here. So the point now is that what I wanted to show to you is that in this rather small snapshot of life in 1 to 3 years, you can build quite a network of important relationships with decision makers. You can build experiences and connect a whole relevant segment of society, and later come up with the same people in other constellations. The exact word in English would be in another setup. Important is also that in every new ecosystem you bring in old fragments of older long-grown ecosystems or networks. So these webs are multidimensional. They are definitely not easy to paint down, and every new ecosystem builds on something you have already built before. So also this agility to connect different worlds, let's say the world of financial services, IPOs, which connects high-tech companies, and also consulting, etc. This adds to an experience of connecting dots, connecting different angles of society, science in many cases, economy, etc. I could pick up other documents out of my shelf and do the whole mind map in a similar way. So what I wanted to show you is that whatever you do in your career, it may come back, end up in a web of connections, of trusted relationships that help you solve future problems. Such a network may generate an ecosystem with unique capability. So what's the type of capabilities you need? It's capabilities being built in such a world which has been depicted by the model I have shown you. Right before moving around in such a web, a net, over time, over different professions or sectors, that's definitely the base experience you need to become an orchestrator of an ecosystem. We need interdisciplinary people, people that know different cultures, people that know different professions, people that understand science in depth, people with a broad knowledge, people that are trained to solve challenges, face challenges, people that are trained to bring together the best players in the game, matchmakers, people that show resilience and have a persistent way of finding solutions. We can help you find these profiles, these individuals, these orchestrators in your organization. If you need a sparring partner to optimize your ecosystem, if you want to challenge whether you create valuable impact, drop me a line, call me, or send me an email on andreasjonka@compressor.ch.